Welcome back. Mike Foy and Frank Mitchell.
Frank Mitchell here with Boomer.
Yeah, so my dog is currently hanging out with us. For part 2 of our discussion, we have 3 more questions to go. So the next question up is, how does he hold up to the counterparts in horror? And that basically means his contemporaries at the time. And, Jason Voorhees, big one, obviously, because Jason really dominated the 80s.
Yes, he did.
8 films. Agree. 8 films were made in 10 years. I mean, that's pretty ridiculous. Michael Myers was resurrected during his time. You had Chucky running around.
Oh yeah, I forgot about Child's Play in the 80s.
Child's Play. I think it was like 1988. I believe was the first one. Child's Play is not bad. I was really freaked out by it when I was a kid, but
That's because the doll.
They're not.
Was fucking freaky.
But they're not. I mean, they're not bad. But I think they just obviously did the same thing. They got more and more ridiculous.
Mike Foy, I am going to
like
go
everything
ahead
else.
and I am going to say that I think that Freddy Krueger is heads and shoulders above any horror icon. I mean, excluding the true greats of Frankenstein and everyone from that era.
Mm-hmm.
But Freddy Krueger, I just feel like his just the concept of him in general is awesome because he's a thought, he's a ghost, he's nothing. As long as someone mentions his name and you start thinking of him, that's it. That's all it takes. It's just his word, his name, and whatever is connected with that. That's horrifying enough of a concept. But B, you have to sleep at some point. You can't escape sleep.
Exactly.
That's just something so you're almost guaranteed to see this fucker. So it just makes him that much scarier when you're like, all right, I have to face him. At some point I have to face him. It's really unsettling. And no other character in horror, I feel, has that. Not one. I mean, you look at Michael Myers and, Jason Voorhees and, even Chucky to an extent. They're killing for the sake of a body count. I feel like Freddy Krueger almost appreciates the art of killing somebody and tries to do it in the most unique way possible. And I mean, let's be honest, that's what we go to these movies to see. We go to these movies to see, a good story and, everything as we were, discussing before, but we also wanted to have, we want to see a good kill.
You want to see the horrific side of things. That's what you're going for.
Exactly. That's another side of what you're seeing.
Comedies, you're seeing the comedic side of things.
Exactly.
Movies, it's supposed to be nasty stuff.
Exactly.
It's supposed to be horrifying.
I feel that Freddy Krueger was the palette with which a lot of horror movies and horror, not conventions, but more horror movie, like the thought of a killer who really relished the idea of killing. Mm-hmm. Which I feel like up until that point was never really seen. And since then, we've had things like I feel like even the introduction of the Hannibal Lecter character into popular culture is directly related to Nightmare on Elm Street, because I feel like Hannibal shares that same relish for killing somebody. And it was just packaged in a slightly different form. He's more realistic, and there's a sort of method to his madness that makes him the interesting Hannibal Lecter. And I'm saying from a book standpoint, it doesn't necessarily have to be the Anthony Hopkins, derivation, but I feel like characters since Freddy have all drawn from Freddy in the scary / killer horror sense.
In forms of the movies, yeah. I mean, I feel like it's something that it can't not leave a lasting impact. How these movies have stuck around for so long. How these characters have stuck around so long. But I feel that Freddy is definitely one of those killers who he's not like Jason, where Jason's literally like a physically retarded retard who is just out for revenge over his mother's death, and he basically just kills anything that he runs into. Where Freddy is, he does enjoy it. He does relish it. He doesn't. It's not like Michael Myers, who is more mindless killer. Leatherface, I'm sure, enjoys killing people, but he's not vocal about it.
He really. There's no sense of whether or not he enjoys it.
Yeah, he's kind of just
seems
all
like
over
just
the
a
place.
motor function.
Yeah, he's just like, oh my god, I'm gonna kill you.
Yeah.
Where Freddy, Freddy's just, and he's the embodiment of what a nasty, disgusting person is. And it gets back to what I said earlier, that he is, in the opening of that film, that's how he's depicted. And I imagine seeing his face and just being, dirty and gritty, and like I said, kind of like, slightly nasty teeth. I don't picture him as being too old before he was burned, but,
Yeah, you expect him with a little bit of age.
Yeah. But you definitely expect him to have a little bit of wear and tear as well. But, he, that's definitely the impression you get. And when you first see him on screen, he is dirty and nasty.
Oh yeah, and he's very low lit.
He's
low
very
lit. Yeah. There's some side lighting, so you can see the shines on his face, and you can see that there's like bubbling and not active bubbling, but it looks just fucking
it
gruesome.
Looks fresh and
you
raw.
never see his whole face. You're always like he's half covered by something, or you can only see his eyes because there are pipes in the way. I feel it's very effective, and you're almost in the seat. When you're watching the movie, you're almost kind of adjusting your vision in how you're looking to try to see more of his face.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely keep. I mean, I just brought up a picture for me and Frank to look at. That's of Freddy right when he's confronting Tina in the alley.
Oh,
he puts his claw up and says, "This is God." And
yeah.
he just, looking at this photo, it's just, you can see the burns, but his face is very covered.
You almost have to squint to see it. There's a lot, and he's also moving.
Most of the side of his face is covered. But you can see his eyes. His eyes are peeking out literally over a shadow.
So it really gives a sense of depth to his face. I just felt like everything was very, very well lit. He's fucking deranged.
He's
Jesus.
just very raw and just very grotesque in the film. I mean, you look at him and he looks like a realistically burned person. He doesn't look like something where later on he almost he didn't look like he looked more like a monster. He looked like the burns more overtook him. Where in the second movie, I feel like the burns still look okay, and the third one and the fourth one, I think they look all right. The fifth one, they look terrible, and the sixth one, and the sixth one, the makeup is terrible. When you look at a picture of him from the first one, it still looks like his face, when it's just all burned up. But there's still some little tiny patches of skin, and it's just disgusting. And he's got literally bits of skin hanging, and it just feels nastier. It just really does. Where later on he almost got more healed, and sort of that kind of I felt takes away from the character.
Yeah.
In the seventh movie, when they redesigned Freddy, and you redesigned his face, I felt it was very effective. I really liked it. I mean, I really, really just enjoyed the movie. And I enjoyed that reinvention of the character. His face was... It was like raw, but it wasn't. It had a weird kind of texture to it. But it looked, it was just definitely fresh and interesting. Where, again, the fifth one I feel is just... It looks very bloated, and he looks kind of more like a monster. It looks more like twisted. Where the sixth one, it's just sort of on his face, and it just looks very stretched, and I don't know. It just doesn't look that great.
I definitely can see what you're saying. I understand what you mean. They sort of go through a definition each time, and it becomes more homogenized, and you're just getting the most basic sense of it each time, until finally it's just a very, very watered-down version.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what it is. I mean, I've got some really nice pictures of some images from the movie and whatnot, but I've got some nice pictures of Freddy, Robert Englund sitting in the chair as Freddy right after the makeup was finished, and you can get a pretty decent sense of what he looks like. And he's technically not completely burned up. he actually still has a fair amount of skin on the front of his face.
Uh-huh.
It's, as you can see from the picture, you can actually, just as a reference, head over to nightmareonelmstreetfilms.com, fan-built site, and just got a lot of great stuff that you can download for free. It's actually where I got the Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 first draft script. Got here for free. They able just to download it. They got all kinds of sound clips and trailers and behind-the-scenes footage, and we've got this kind of stuff. So this is a nice place to go for all things Nightmare on Elm Street. But I've collected pictures from all kinds of different sites over time, and so a lot of them actually are defunct at this point. So it's actually kind of nice that I saved them. But yeah, I mean, the picture we have up is a profile, and you can really see a lot of skin around the eyes and the nose and the chin area and the mouth and even kind of part of the forehead. You could say, there's blotches, but it's not completely burned up. But he's got more like these gaping holes in his face where the skin has completely melted away, and it's just disgusting.
It looks like there are like chunks of skin that are scooped out, and it's interesting to see that, like, because usually with this sort of makeup, you have to add on, even if you're trying to make it look like you're missing skin, you still have to add something to your face, so it looks like there's something on top of it all the time. So to see that they managed to make it look like he's missing skin while still having a normal shaped head and features is very impressive.
I mean, you can't really appreciate the makeup in the film because you so seldom see it. I mean, you get an idea of it, but it's lit to be like that, to make it more mysterious and to really play on it and to get the best out of the makeup that they could. Because there are times when you look at it and he looks really twisted. And he's really nasty kind of look. Especially when he's smiling with this grin on his face and he's got these rotten, burned out teeth. It's just gross. So we're going to look at take a look at the makeup from Part 2, and we can kind of discuss a little bit of the difference. So, makeup in Part 2 was
already atrocious.
A lot different. It had more of a healed across the whole thing.
Yeah.
Where it wasn't as didn't have these big gaping holes or missing patches of skin. Yeah. It doesn't look bad on screen. I don't think. I think the makeup still looks alright. Yeah, and then the makeup in 3 was basically more of the same, except it kind of had a little bit more of a feature of blotchy areas.
It's wet look. Looks like a friggin' turkey or something, just like stretched out turkey skin.
Yeah, that's it's one of those things. Makeup always changing, but he still looks human here. He doesn't look too ridiculous. I just feel like as it went on, the makeup just got a little too
shitty.
Yeah. I think the fourth one. Pull up a picture here. It still looks alright. It's got the same basic idea. The only thing, this particular picture looks like clay. It's that looks a little weird. That looks a little better.
It wasn't clay.
But he looks very different compared to what he did look like. And it's it's only 4 movies in. And it just, it's interesting how quickly it changes. I don't know, I don't have good pictures of the 5th one, but I just think it looked puffy. Here it looks better in this. There's a water sequence where he kind of inside this like boiler tank thing, and he pops up, he comes up like out of the water, and he's doing like this Jaws thing with the claws, and he's got this I guess maybe special makeup for the water effect, but the makeup actually looked better during that sequence. It looked it didn't have that puffy kind of look to it. I don't know. It was hard to explain. The makeup just looked very weird, but the makeup artist changed. Originally, it was David Miller in the first film, and it was Kevin Yeager for the second, third, and fourth, and then David Miller came back for the 5th one. I'm not sure about the 6th one, and I know we did the 7th one. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good pictures out there, which are nice. I mean, it's interesting to get a different viewpoint of the movie. Because I feel like there is, with certain Nightmare on Elm Street, there is more. It is more to the movie. Where the fourth one was a disaster, mostly because the script was such a mess. There's a lot of dead ends. There was a writer's strike going on at the time. It was a hodgepodge, and it's kind of lucky almost it got made. But it's not horrible, but it's just kind of like a little weird. A little. It just does. It could have been much better.
How would you say Freddy Krueger measures up in today's world, in terms of not necessarily horror icon, but more? I feel like this question could be combined with the last question because I feel like it is the same sort of question. Could this sort of movie be made today? Because I feel like that reflects to how does Freddy measure up in today's world. I feel like those three questions are sort of all the same, very, very, very similar subject matter. I personally feel that seeing the trajectory of what happened when this movie was made, it's difficult to imagine if this movie, are we asking if this movie wasn't made before, could it be made now?
I guess that's a two-part question. It's really a question of can a reboot be done of it, and can it be made today if it was never made before? But it's a hard thing to answer. A reboot/remake could work, and I think it's proven by the fact that $63 million at the box office is. Not bad.
Nothing to sneeze at.
I mean, I think what did we say it was made for? We had looked it up.
I don't remember. I was trying to think of it.
But I mean, it certainly made oodles of money compared to what it was made for, and it didn't cost that much. The amount of money that it drew is it certainly would warrant a sequel in terms of generating revenue, and that's what these studios want. They want a horror icon that they can keep using and using and using, and drain the blood out of it. It's characters like this, they get lost as time goes on, but it's not that they can't be brought back and reinvented. And I think Wes Craven's New Nightmare proved that you could reboot the character successfully, and I like that New Nightmare played on what we already knew. I like that it wasn't a reboot. I liked that it was a sequel. I liked that it was a different look at the series. Where the 2010 remake, it just wasn't. I don't think it hit the nail on the head. It just didn't really achieve its goal. And its goal was, essentially to. It was written by the same guys who did the Friday the 13th sequel, so basically to be as successful. And it was actually financially as successful. But as in terms of a movie, there were a lot of people. I like the Friday the 13th remake, but there are a lot of people who didn't like it, and I don't understand why, personally. To me, those guys took the best things out of the first four movies and put them into one movie, and I think it works. I think it successfully, brings Jason back to the screen. Where the Nightmare film is just, it's a mess. The acting is atrocious. And it just destroyed Nancy. They completely destroyed her character.
Was Nancy in that movie?
She's in the remake, but she's not the same character. She's not a strong-willed woman. She's this, shaky, skinny teenager. And I really didn't like her. I did not like her at all. And I don't think it worked. Jackie Earle Haley was the only good part of that movie for me. I liked him, but everybody else was really very off. And part of it's the screenplay, and part of it's the... I'm not sure, maybe part of it's probably the direction. I mean, the girl who played the new Tina, I don't remember what the hell her name was in the movie, she constantly was crying. That's all she did, and she has this big puffy... She has a puffy face to begin with, so her face gets puffier when she cries, and she's got these big puffy lips, and I feel like her face is going to explode. And she's just, it's just constantly ooh, in your face, puffy. It just gets it, annoying. Chris, that's right. Her name was like Chris. But she's Tina. I was not impressed with a lot of it, and it didn't capture me the same way. It just wasn't as good. It just legitimately was not as good in terms of a remake, and certainly not as anywhere near what the original was, because there was no substance there.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what I think? I'm really just thinking about this for the first time, because I haven't really had a big time discussion about it. I guess their Friday the 13th remake works for me because it fits into what I see that series as, which is just something to sit back and enjoy and have fun with. Where Nightmare on Elm Street is scary because it's real things. It's metaphors for real issues and all kinds of other things.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more substance there. Maybe that's why they couldn't adapt it. Maybe they weren't. Maybe they're not those kind of writers.
Because they've lost the commentary on those sorts of things.
Not that they've lost the commentary, that they don't know how to do it. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe it was easy to do Friday the 13th because there doesn't have to be a lot of subtext.
All you're really grabbing is the character, like that.
Exactly. Freddy, you're not doing that.
Freddy needs a basis. Freddy needs a reason to be killing people. You have to tell that story.
Exactly. And it's not that they, didn't give Freddy a backstory. It's just that, I guess what I didn't get about it was, this is the best way to explain my confusion, is why would Freddy take his glove and claw the girl and then send her back to her parents?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I understand he's the janitor, he's at the place, or he's the gardener or whatever, and, he claws her in private or whatever, but don't you think you're going to get caught if you let the kid go? That's what I didn't understand. I thought they were making him a molester and a murderer. That's what I thought they were doing. And to me, that is even more diabolical than a child murderer.
Yeah,
and,
you don't say.
That was the original intent for the character, was to make him that disgusting and dirty. And I could picture that. I could picture him just doing whatever he wanted to anything. Because he's just a kind of a force moving along, like he's just one of those people that you feel really uncomfortable around, that they're unpredictable, and you feel, threatened by them. Because you just don't know what they're going to do. And to me, that's the kind of person Freddy was. He was just a nasty individual. And I could picture him doing those things. The problem was they wanted Freddy to be sympathetic. And they made it very sympathetic for Freddy. And they took a character that was supposed to be despicable, and they made me feel bad for him. And that's where that's where the remake really fails, right on its face. It just falls right on its face.
So you would say that this movie would not be able to be remade today with the success level that it saw when it previously was released? I
think that if it was done the same way, I think it could be. They made him a sympathetic character because you felt bad that, he did a horrible thing to a kid, but, these people are tracking him down, and he's so scared, and, he's like, freaking out, and, they make it, they don't make him as despisable of a character. I don't know what it is. It's not that you don't feel uncomfortable because he's a child molester, but there's something more dangerous about Robert Englund's performance.
Mm-hmm.
I can't quite put my finger on it. There's just something about him that he just comes off as more twisted and just seems a little bit darker. I don't know. Maybe it's just the way that he acts it out. I'm not sure. It'd be something for me to ponder for the future. But I feel that I feel like the movie could definitely be redone today. Had it been done right. I feel like what they should have done was made him a molester and a child murderer. He should not have been running around with the kids and all that kind of crap, because that to me was not what Freddy was. And I feel like some people felt cheated because of that. And I don't know if I went so far as to feel cheated, but I felt like that's not what the essence of the character was. The character was a dirty, nasty kind of an individual, not running around with kids all happy. It just seemed to, it was a complete reinvention of that. They took the basic idea and they gave it they gave it all this detail and just didn't. It was something that didn't really appeal to me as much as the original concept. And had they decided to make him a dark, twisted character and have him, working in like a boiler room and bringing these kids down to a boiler room and killing them, and that would be really fucked up to see it as a backstory. You know what I mean? Like, that would have been really messed up, and have people do a better acting job throughout the whole film to keep you enticed. But I feel like that was the backstory that it needed. And I would have been fine with him being, child molester and murderer, because that makes him more despicable and makes him scarier. And that was part of what was originally there, so it's not like I feel like it's taking it too far. I feel like that's just amps it up.
Taking it where it needs to go.
Yeah, it amps it up to a place that's just like, you could probably see it going anyway. But, it doesn't quite do that. It makes him more of like a misunderstood kind of a person. And I don't know, I just didn't like that about it. I didn't like the doubt. I didn't like any of that. As much as I did, because it was interesting, there was just something about it that I didn't ultimately like. I wanted to see something that was more twisted, because I felt like they did a good job with Jason. I enjoyed what they had put there.
Mm-hmm.
But, the acting I actually think was better in that movie. Yeah, but I think part of it's really the script. I think it's, the whole idea with all the parents is very messed up. That could have been done so much better if they had put some substance there. Had it be about Nancy, for Christ's sake. Have it be about Nancy and dealing with her mother and how keep the father as a police. Why did you have to change all that?
Mm-hmm.
The father's like, what, dead in the remake?
Well, there's no mention of it.
Exactly. It's fucking stupid. And that's what I didn't like about it. And I will say it's fucking stupid. I don't care if people disagree with me. It's just my opinion. But, I don't understand why you had to go in and change all of those details.
Mm-hmm.
It's way too much. I understand if you want to rename a couple characters. That's not a big deal. And, it's not like it has to be a carbon copy. And it shouldn't be a carbon copy. But you didn't have to change that much of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're gonna change it, at least replace it with something that's comparable. There was nothing there to really grasp onto. It's kind of hard. And then all of a sudden, at the end of the movie, Nancy just wakes up, and oh, now she kills Freddy. Like, fuck you. This character has been nothing but boring, and she's just like a scared little girl. And if that was the intent of the director, you really fucking pulled it off. But you made for a really shitty movie.
Mm-hmm.
Nancy, played by Heather Langenkamp, was a powerful, person. She was forced to grow up, as we discussed before. She's got to watch all these people die around her. She's got to deal with this problem, and she faces it, and she wins. So it's something that, the ending is up to kind of interpretation because of backstory behind it and everything else, but it's, she defeats it because she overcomes it. There's nothing to overcome in this movie. What, the fact that he molested her in particular? I just don't. I don't know. There was just something they didn't have that same substance behind it. I guess what it is too, Freddy has substance, and then no one else does. So it's clearly about Freddy.
Exactly, because the only thing they really brought
Instead
over
of being about
from the original was Freddy. And they were basically building a new story around him of a story that we already know.
I didn't like that part of it. And understandably.
Mm-hmm.
As you get down to it, I feel like, the movie could be made today. It could certainly be made today. And you know what? Funny enough, there's not even a reason to change Robert Englund. Robert Englund has already proved he can reinvent the character with New Nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
I understand he went back to a different version of the character for Freddy versus Jason, but that was upon essentially request. That's what they wanted to do. But he was certainly more than willing to take up the task in New Nightmare and pulled it off brilliantly. He brought the character back down to a darker level, back down to something that was closer to the original. Was more like 3. He very playful, but still very twisted. Brought it down to something, much closer to the original. So as much as it's interesting to see somebody else take on the mantle of the character, I feel like you could still right now make another Nightmare on Elm Street with Robert Englund. I feel like he could still play that character in a different way.
I agree it could be made, and I agree it could make money, but it would not be impactful. It would be the same thing. I don't feel that there would be a real reinvention, because you still have to play on the same things that made it famous in the first place, which was, all the tropes that it went through. So, I mean, I feel that it could be made, and it could be successful, but I don't feel like it would have the same impact that the original had at all.
Well, I think it has the potential to have a severe impact, but I don't think I don't think anything could ever have as big of an impact as the original. It's like the original Halloween. It had such a massive impact. There are movies that just hit the market at the right time, and Nightmare on Elm Street waited a while. The script was floating around for years, and finally found Bob Shea at New Line Cinema, and it came out, it came out at the right time. It was something that it did well during its mid '80s and late '80s run. It sort of filled the gap. Michael was dead. You had Jason hopping around, and they were fighting a lot of copycat movies that were terrible. There were a lot of holiday movies at the time. But, here comes something that was original and different. I mean, regardless of the fact that it's a slasher, it's still different. It wasn't the flesh and blood killer. It was something that was dead. Pretty weird.
I agree.
But I feel like had the remake been done better, even if the backstory was kept the same, if every other aspect of the film had been done, correctly and in a better fashion, I feel like the movie could have had more of an impact. I feel like it could have done something to really better the character, and push it into a more modern age and whatnot. But of course I agree that there's nothing that can be, it can't be as impactful as the original. But, I feel like it's something that it could be good. It could be very good and very interesting. But it's a very hard thing to pull off. And funny enough, Wes Craven seems to be the only one who can really do it. He did it with Nightmare 3 by linking stories. By making Part 1 and Part 3 to be, comparable sequels, and not just have Freddy running around in different movies, just, oh, now I'm going to kill these people, oh, now I'm going to kill this, Somebody else moves into the house, somebody else moved into the house. That would be really annoying as a series, if it was just people who lived in the house. So, and it could have gone that way, you never know. You never know what would have happened had Wes Craven not written a script. But it's funny that, he did it again with New Nightmare. It's just, it's interesting how, he's able to bring the character to a new level both times. Yeah, no, I mean, a remake, reboot, it's hard. It's a hard thing to pull off. And I said earlier that I despised the Halloween remake by Rob Zombie. And when I've just spoken to you about this, that refers to the theatrical cut. Because the theatrical cut is actually, to me, it's dramatically different from the director's cut. The director's cut is 12 minutes longer, has a completely alternate escape sequence. And I feel the same way about the Halloween 2 remake, where the theatrical cut is horrendous, but the unrated director's cut is much, much better. There's 14 minutes more movie. It just makes a lot more sense. And it shifts the movie from 1 year later to 2 years later. But I liked those two movies as unrated director's cuts. They're not perfect, and a lot of people out there are going to probably hate me now because I'm saying that I like them. But the theatrical cuts were horrendous. And, I can't agree more with that point. But the unrated director's cuts had something more to offer. And it showed, it gave some certainly an original spin to the whole concept. It really changed it and updated it. You know, whether or not you like it, it did update it and change it. But I think it's an interesting companion to the original series. You know, the thing we all have to face is that we look at this as, how could they be doing this, blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? People back in like the 40s and the 50s, how could they be doing this to Frankenstein and, you know what I mean? All these classic monster movies they made movies that were such a joke. Those concepts all got so ridiculous. What's to stop them from doing that with these? Of course, Halloween will be remade like a dozen times. Look at Night of the Living Dead. It's been remade like 5 times already. Once by George Romero. Or, you know, technically Tom Savini, but you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. It's still written by him, and he was still like a producer on the movie. He still technically ended up like remaking it in a sense. It's just the fact that the movie's just been remade so many times. It's only about 40 years old. And certain movies, it's just going to keep happening. It's just going to travel through time like that.
You're right.
You know, these movies some of those movies are 80 years old now. And there's been, like, every, 10 years, there's, these, Frankenstein movies. Early 90s, there was one. There was Bram Stoker's Dracula, Interview with the Vampire. All these concepts of, those are all, the Interview with the Vampire is just an example of, that concept that's obviously been around forever, too, on film. Certain concepts will always be around, and certain characters will always be brought back. Horror goes through phases, just like every other genre goes through phases. There are times when horror movies get really popular, certain kinds of horror movies get really popular, and then they die out. They burn themselves out. And, they get really bad. And then something new comes along, and it's refreshing. Either, whether it be horror, or then comedies get really popular. And there's something new there. And that's what always ends up happening. When there's sort of a reinvention with the next generation, then, things get leapt forward and become fresh and new and fun again. So, I think with some of this, you have to take them with a slight grain of salt, because they're just going to keep doing it anyway. So, you can either choose to, you don't have to love it, and I would never say that, but you don't have to hate it either. You can, give it a chance and realize that it's not going to be as good as the original, and you know what? If it's not, whatever. At least you still have the original.
True.
I mean, it's not that it doesn't suck. It's just that no matter what anybody seems to do, it's not going to stop. So that's just where I'm at, and that's what I think. That's the best thing. That's the best way to approach it at this point.
I'm not going to support it. I'm not going to I will not pay money to see it.
Yeah.
I'll fucking download it. I'm not going to fucking.
Exactly.
I'm not going to pay for it.
Well, I think we've said all we need to say.
Do you think?
I think we have. I think we've said all we need to say on the topic. Freddy is a very complex character. At the end of the day.
Oh yeah, I'll agree with that.
He's, there's a lot there to digest if you, and you don't. Some of it, you look into it, but I don't think you're pulling out anything that's not really there. You don't have to see it if you don't want to. You can just enjoy it for the crazy slasher kind of movie that it is. I think it will always remain a classic.
I can definitely agree with that. Classics will always be remade, but there's no reason to support them, damn it.
No, there isn't, and I'm not saying to support them. It's just that I think that sometimes they turn out to be not so bad.
I think there are...
And if they're going to be made anyway...
It's more that there are elements of it that are good, but overall, I feel the execution is never effective.
Well, most of them, I agree. To me, I thought that the Friday the 13th one was an example of one that surpassed that usual mark. Because most of them, I do agree, are just like that. And they're not really much more than that. But I feel like the unrated director's cuts of the Halloweens were a little bit more than that. They were entertaining.
They were more effective as a film.
I enjoyed watching them. I enjoyed watching those. So, I don't know. We will always, of course, revisit Freddy, because he's Freddy. And how can you not possibly revisit him?
Yeah, really.
So, Freddy is one of those characters, as we've talked about Jason and Michael and everybody else, you're always going to be weaving in and out. So, there's a main focus on this, but don't think this topic is really over. Hopefully you've enjoyed Mitchoy Chats. I know I have, Frank. I'm getting tired myself. We've had a long evening of doing the first show, but I think it's gone pretty awesome.
It has. I agree with that assessment.
Well, I'm Mike Foy from Mitchoy Chats, brought to you by Shut Up Yo.
And I'm Frank Mitchell, brought to you by my parents.
So, next week, we haven't decided a new topic yet, but that's alright. It'll be a surprise topic for you, the audience.
It's gonna be a cooking show. You don't know what the fuck's gonna happen. This is Mitchoy Chats.
See you next week,
bitches.